my lovelies, today's video is going to be the mid-year book freakout tag. I'm actually really on track with my reading at the moment. I'm aiming to read 60 books this year, and at the moment filming this I've read 34, so a book a week for the rest of the year should get me to my goal. The first question is the best book you've read so far in 2020, and I've got to say that it's either got to be The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell or The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. The Silent Companions really took me by surprise, and it is a historical fiction about these silent companions, which are basically wooden cutouts of figures, and they do some really spooky stuff, so I wasn't expecting this to be quite as a creepy vibe as it was, and I really enjoyed it. I was just really taken away with the creepy vibe of Laura Purcell's writing, and I love the way that she wrote hot historical fiction, and as this book moves between different time periods, and it gave me a really Weeping Angels vibe, but this time with cardboard cutouts, and the ending was spectacular, so I really enjoyed this book, and it took me by surprise because I didn't really know anything going into it. I just picked it up for the stay-at-home reading rush. The other book that I read so far this year that I was really starstruck by was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is a YA contemporary book about police brutality, and it follows the story of Star and the aftermath of her fatal shooting of her friend who was unarmed at the time. I don't normally pick up contemporary, but this book had a really moving and powerful way of talking about police brutality and racism in America, which is unfortunately still relevant when it shouldn't be, so I really recommend picking this one up. The second question is the best sequel you've read so far in 2020, and I've also got two books for this. I've got Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J Maas, which is the finale book in the Throne of Glass series, and I've got The Lost Princess by Connie Glynn, which is the third book in the Rosewood Chronicles. I was absolutely infatuated with both. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I love Connie Glynn's writing, and I also love Sarah J Maas' books. The fantasy in this is so complex and so detailed, and it all comes together brilliantly in the finale book, even though it's a chunky boy, and I enjoyed all 980 pages of it, and I love the characters so much. But I also really enjoy the characters in Rosewood, and this is actually set in Rosewood's sister school in Japan for this book, so it added this extra detail that I also love. I love learning about Japan. I used Japan for my dissertation, so this added an extra bit of culture to it, which I really enjoyed. The ongoing plot in the Rosewood books is actually starting to get quite sinister and deepen a lot more, whereas in Kingdom of Ash it's all come to an end in one big battlefield, and it was amazing, and I love the characters in both so much. In this book, the characters actually end up being still angsty and kind of falling out with each other, and I really just want them all to be friends again, whereas in this book we do get some happy endings for people. Kingdom of Ash, in my opinion, was the absolute perfect finale to the Throne of Glass series, and The Lost Princess by Connie Glynn is an absolutely amazing sequel. There are going to be two other books after this in this plot, and this had a really nice, good cliffhanger that was actually quite eerie on the end of it, so that's made me really fall in love with the Rosewood series, and I've loved the other two books, so high hopes for the rest of it as well. The third question is new releases that you haven't read yet, and if you saw my TBR video, you know these are really high up my summer TBR, and that is Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas, which is the new book in her new series, and it's actually categorised as adult fiction now instead of YA fiction, and the sequel to A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer, which is A Heart So Fierce and Broken, and I'm so hyped about this because A Curse So Dark and Lonely was one of my favourite books of last year, and I've heard people say that this is also a really good sequel. A Heart So Fierce and Broken is set in an urban fantasy, so there is our world and there's also the fantasy world, and it follows the aftermath of the breaking of the curse, which was not straightforward in the first book. It did not have a straightforward ending, and the love plot and all that is still very complicated, so that needs to be resolved in this. And Crescent City is in a new fantasy world by Sarah J Maas. That is a lot more modern than in the other two books. It actually has cities and partying and all that, but it still keeps in all these magical elements. It's involving a lot more creatures than it was in her other two series. We have fae, as always, because Sarah J Maas writes good fae, but we've also got in this angels and demons and all sorts of demon hunter-y type things. Crescent City follows the story of Bryce, whose best friend was murdered by a demon, and 2 years later, when she tries to investigate, she actually teams up with a fallen angel to do so. The fourth question is your most anticipated release for the rest of the year, and I've got quite a few. I've got them all on pre-order luckily, but the two I'm really most excited about is Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, which is the third and final book in the Cruel Prince series, or should I call it by its actual title, which is the Folk of Air series. The Queen of Nothing has actually been out for a while, but only on hardback, so I've got the paperback on pre-order, which comes out this August in the UK, so I haven't actually read the third book yet, and it's been a long time since I read The Wicked King, which is the second book, but it had a really good cliffhanger on it, so I'm so excited for that. And the other book that I've also got on pre-order is Cinderella is Dead. It's a Cinderella retelling, and it's set in Cinderella's kingdom way after she gets a happy ending, but things are not quite so happy anymore. Young girls have to go to a ball, and if they are not selected, bad things happen to them. And there's this whole big mystery where the Cinderella plot gets twisted a lot, and I've heard good things about the way it turns the Cinderella story onto its head, and there's meant to be a lot of good twists and turns in it, so I'm really excited about that because Cinderella was my favourite princess, and the cover of this is so stunning as well, so I've got that on pre-order too. Question number 5 is your biggest disappointment of the year, and I've got to say that is the 2 H.G. Wells books that I read for my sci-fi module right at the beginning of the year, and that's The Time Machine and not The War of the Worlds. I picked up the wrong book. The other book is The Island of Dr. Moreau. I didn't actually get to read War of the Worlds because I ran out of time, and so I might have not read it for the seminar, but it was okay because I didn't write on it. I was actually really disappointed in the way Wells writes. I was so excited for it because H.G. Wells is a big name in the sci-fi world. His concepts I thought were amazing. The way that Wells writes action, and he also demonizes anyone who isn't the white scholarly protagonist, which is really frustrating. So I got really tired of his writing after just reading 2 books, so I'm hoping the War of the Worlds, when I do get round to it, will be different because it's absolutely one of my favourite stories from the Jeff Rowling play, and I love all the movie adaptations of it. But I was just... Wells did not write well, in my opinion, and it's annoying because it was good concepts whose execution fell flat. And I was also kind of disappointed by Deathless Divide by Justina Ireland, which is the sequel to Dread Nation. This is a series that follows a zombie apocalypse and what would happen if the zombie apocalypse happened just after the Civil War in America. So you've got zombie apocalypse, historical fiction, and then also a theme of racism. And I really loved the idea. I enjoyed the first book. There were some minor details that I thought could have been improved in the second book, but the second book didn't do that. There was a lot of, I guess, fill it in. It went down a direction that I didn't want it to go in. I wanted more zombies. I wanted more descriptions of how the world works. It feels like a lot of this could have been cut out. If I went back and told you absolutely everything that happened in it, there seems more pages than you would think for it. And that's why I think there's a lot of filler in it. And it didn't hit the mark the way I thought it was going to. Question number 6 is the biggest surprise of the year, and I said before that The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell was a big surprise to me because I had no expectations going into it. It had been on my shelf for quite a while from a charity shop buy, so I've sort of forgotten what it was meant to be about, and then I picked it up for Stay at Home Reading Rush because it has a house on the cover, so I didn't really have that big expectations, so the actual creepy historical vibe took me by surprise, and I loved it. But the other book that also took me by surprise was The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis, which is a book that I had to read for my sci-fi module at the beginning of the year. I haven't read any of the Chronicles of Narnia before I read this, so what really took me by surprise is the fact that this is book 6, but you can absolutely read it as a standalone. That is written that well that you could pick it up, read it on its own, and enjoy the story and still know what's going on. And I love that the world of Narnia is not what I've seen it to be in the movies, and it was just a lot more, I guess, philosophical than I was expecting it to be. It's a children's story, it's got adventure in there, it's got all the magical world, but there's also some deeper reflections that you can read into it, especially if you're reading it critically or you're going to write on it. So that really took me by surprise, and I really did enjoy this book, despite me jumping in at book 6 and then never having read any of the other books before. Question number 7 is favourite new author, and I'm going to say Laura Purcell because even though I've only read that one book, I was so taken away with the writing and I loved it so much that I went and bought her other 2 books, which are The Corset and Bone China, so I've got high expectations for these having the same deliciously creepy writing. But also a favourite new author for me is Jane Austen. I hadn't read any Jane Austen before, but I took a Jane Austen module, so of course we read through all her works, and I ended up enjoying them a lot more than I thought I was going to. I don't normally read classics, but I did enjoy the way that these read. I enjoyed the fact that Jane Austen's a lot more witty than I thought she was going to be, and they're just good old classic romances as well. There's a bit more comedy in them than I was expecting to be, especially in the ones such as Emma. So Jane Austen is a new favourite author for me, even though she's a favourite author for many already. Question number 8 is new fictional crush, and I haven't actually come across that many new characters that I've really fallen in love with. There's a lot of characters that I had already loved before going into reading them in 2020, such as the characters in the Throne of Glass series. I already love the characters of Eli and Lorcan, but there's a moment in this book, there's a scene in this book where that relationship is just peaks, and I love it so much. There's this one new scene in Kingdom of Ash, the Battle of Aniel, that just solidified them as one of my favourite ships ever. They're one of my favourite couples to come together, and I really enjoyed their characters a lot, but they're not new to me, so I don't know if I include them here. But a favourite new couple that I read about was Nazir and Zafira in We Hunt the Flame by Hazza Faisal, who is an amazing author and a great person to interact with on Instagram. Although neither character sort of stands out on their own as being like one of my favourite characters ever, but the way they interact together and them as like an image of a couple, I really enjoyed. This is an enemies to lovers romance because Nazir is actually the Prince of Death. He is an assassin for his father, the Sultan, and Saphira is known as the Hunter. She disguises herself as a man to go into the Ars, which is a magical and evil forest, and come back out with food for the village and her family, but this Kafilate doesn't actually take very well to women, so she has to do it in disguise as a man. So she is technically a civilian under control of the Sultan, and we also have the Sultan's son, who is actually also under the control of the Sultan. So I enjoyed the way that they interact and the way that that developed. But I'm not sure which one I put out as a standout fictional crush. I prefer the way they interact rather than like who they are individually, but that might change in the sequel, which I'm really hyped for. Question number 9 is new favourite character, and I've got to say that is Altair from We Hunt the Flame. I'm not quite sure whether I'd put him as high as a crush, but I did really enjoy the way that he is sarcastic to everybody in this, that he makes all these witty remarks. I thought Altair was a great character, not just because of all the sarcastic comments he makes and the banter that he has with Nazir, even if Nazir doesn't want it, but also because Altair knows things, and as the general he's going back into doing all these different like secret things, but is also completely powerless towards the Sultan. And there's also one really good reveal to do with Altair in this book that's a plot twist. The way that this book ended makes me worry for him, but I know that the author on Instagram said that she's going to add a new perspective into the book, because this first book alternates chapters between Nazir and Saphira's perspective, but she said the third one is going to be added into the second book, and I'm hoping that that third perspective will be Altair and we can actually get into his head more instead of just seeing the facade that he puts on. But I've also got to give a shout out to the characters in The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. The way she writes Star's family, it's those sort of characters where you immediately imagine them in your head. You can see exactly what they look like, exactly who they are, exactly how they interact and how they talk. And weirdly enough, the character who I felt the most this way about was actually Star's dad, Maverick. And I could just immediately see him, and I loved the way he's so loyal to his family, that he's a tough guy in one sense, but he's soft and caring in another sense towards his family. And the heartbreaking moments he has to go through to deal with racism in this book. But I could just absolutely picture him in my head. I can picture the way he speaks and the way he's posturing himself or the movements he's making. I had a solid image of who he was, and I really loved him as a character. The Hate You Give also comes under question 10, which is a book that made you cry, and because this is about police brutality and how heartbreaking it is that this is still happening, that there were some moments in this that were absolutely soul destroying, especially when you think that this is still going on and it's a problem that we really need to deal with. So this definitely had its tearful moments. But I also couldn't not cry at Kingdom of Ash as well. That is because we have some tear your heart apart moments and also crying tears of happiness for other characters, and because it was just a perfect ending, I went through all the different emotions and I cried at lots of different points for this book as well. Question number 11 is a book that made you happy, and Kingdom of Ash does come under this as well, because I thought it was an absolutely perfect finale to the series and there were happy endings. It's not all tear your heart apart, even though quite a bit of it is, but there are happy endings, and my heart just felt everything for this book, so that made me so happy. Another book that made me happy was Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. This is because I felt so much nostalgia for it. I hadn't actually read the book before, but I absolutely love everything to do with Neverland and the whole idea of it, and I'd watched the 2005 movie so many times I actually knew the lines before I read them, so this was all the nostalgia and it made me really happy. Question number 12 is the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year, and let me tell you, there's so many, and that is because of my newfound love for hardbacks. Crescent City is an absolutely beautiful book. That's because it's got sprayed edges from the Waterstones exclusive edition, and it's got this absolutely amazing art as well as the beautiful, beautiful map that is in it, if I can get to it. And some of the new books I bought are actually really gorgeous, 2 of which have art on the cover by Charlie Bowater, who is absolutely amazing. These books are all absolutely stunning, and I'm excited to read all of them. These are the 2 that have Charlie Bowater covers on them, and her art is so amazing, and I love the way she draws so much. I think this is absolutely beautiful, and I love the gold accenting on Surfing in Love and the way it shines. I think that is gorgeous as well. And there's a gloss on this War Girls cover that isn't on other types of dust jacket, so this has a nice shine on it, which just accentuates this sci-fi element of it so much. And this art is absolutely beautiful. I love the cyborg cyberkinetics sci-fi element that's going to be on it, and I think the girl on this cover is so stunning that I could actually fall in love with her. And the last question is, what books do you want to read by the end of the year? And if you saw my TBR video, you know that A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Bridget Kemmerer, Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas, and The Pride of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon are definitely books that I'm going to read this summer and I absolutely want to get to. But I'm also really feeling drawn to the books I've bought recently, which include Serpent and the Dove, Bone Cries, Moon, War Girls, and Aurora Rising, but also the 2 Law of Purcell books that I recently bought because I absolutely enjoyed The Silent Companions. I can't wait to get to these. I'm also currently reading the Triskelion series again, and the 3rd book in the Triskelion series is definitely one I'm going to get to. And some of my reading rush TBR is going to include An American Marriage and Half of a Yellow Sun. So that is my mid-year book freakout tag for this year. I am quite happy with what I've read, and I'm absolutely so excited to do even more reading, and I think I'm on track for my reading this year, and there's so many books that I'm so excited about. So thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.